Do you have the time to listen to me whine?
You are listening to Anarcology,
a liberatory approach to confronting trauma, stress, and burnout in the civilized world. Hi, I'm Anarchist prisoner Sean Swain.
and I am Bumblebee.
So thank you for listening. And I think full disclosure before we get started, I have to let you know that I'm highly caffeinated right now. Are you? Have you been drinking? Have you been drinking any coffee this morning?
I haven't been drinking any coffee, but I have been drinking tea because tea is my drink of choice. So I either am drinking tea or water. So I'm drinking tea at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I've been drinking coffee. I just poured my fourth cup, and that's always very important. It's always important for me whenever I'm gonna try to help people and give them really important advice, is to make sure I'm so caffeinated that my mind is kind of like a whole bunch of kittens just falling all over each other like a herd of cats.
Right. You definitely want to stay, nicely caffeinated when you're giving out good advice now.
Yeah. Because right now the inside of my mind is like that, or it's kind of like carnival seating at a Who concert. I've got some ideas that are getting trampled by other ideas.
Right. Yeah. So tell me about some of these ideas. What are some of these ideas you got today?
Well, what I would like to do, if you guys are down with this, is present what I call it's either madness or it's brilliant. It's what I call anarchology.
I like that.
And yeah, okay, good. That's a good start. So anarchology, let me find this because I have a whole bunch of notes about a whole bunch of stuff. So for me, anarchology is the study of freedom and the study of the forces that oppose freedom and how to get to freedom, right?
Right.
So that's kind of my idea. And for our purposes here, what I would like to do with this particular podcast is talk about, because before we can get free from like all the external stuff, we have to develop a method for freeing ourselves from those unseen forces that make us less free, and the way that we even make our choices, the way that we handle trauma and stress and all of that.
Definitely.
So that's kind of like so that's kind of the framework of what I would like to do.
I think it kind of goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier today too, is defining what is freedom. Like what does that mean? Because it might, mean something different, and it looks like something different maybe to everyone.
Yes. And I would suggest that you can't be completely free until you become aware of all of those unseen forces that you haven't thought about and how those are influencing you in the patterns that you develop and the way that you live. So once you can deal with all of those, then you can get actually really free, right?
Right.
So,
but it's almost like also, how do you know what you don't know? Or you don't know what you don't know. So maybe you might not even be, really aware of the things that you feel like are, a barrier to your freedom.
Which is a good thing that we're here. Because you just don't know what you don't know until you find out.
Right. Right, so, exactly.
So So maybe we should introduce ourselves. That's my thinking for this first episode. We introduce ourselves and we talk a bit about who we are and how we're qualified to do this. And then if there's time left over, I'll talk about where I'd like to go with this and how I came up with it. What do you think?
I think that sounds perfect.
Okay. So would you want to, you can go first if you want to,
So
tell us. Yeah.
I don't know if many people probably know who I am, but I am Bumblebee, but also I am Portia. And I'm a life coach, but my background is in psychology. And so my bachelor's is in psychology and my master's is in forensic psychology. And I do life coaching with couples and with inmates and just with individuals in general. So I have, and then, just also aside from just the education that you get from school, because I think that that's minimal compared to the life experiences that you get that are way more educational. So I think that those kind of combined have given me a different perspective. And then just the way that I grew up, my parents were in the military. My mom was in the military. So we moved around a lot. And so I've always been kind of around a diverse group, always been in different kind of places around different kind of people with different backgrounds. And so I've been able to just kind of experience life sometimes through, these other people and learning from their experiences too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think probably that's more important than everything else.
Right. I think that's why I said I think, the education is always good. I love education. I love, learning things, and that's always good, but it doesn't beat actual life experience at all.
Yeah, because you have to care about people, I think. And right. So you care about people, and when you care about people, then you can, then you can do something interesting.
Right. And so, there's so many people out here that, that are social workers or counselors or psychologists or therapists that I think, after a certain amount of time kind of get jaded. And so they started out caring, but, as time goes on and they're just experiencing different things, seeing the same kind of things, you get jaded. And although you care, it's like you really don't care. It's burnout.
Yeah, it is. It's burnout, stress, anxiety, because it's not just regular people that experience that. It's the psychological professionals that help other people deal with it that also experience the burnout and stress and anxiety.
Right. Yeah. So how about you?
In fact, okay. So I know we're supposed to talk about our qualifications, but I think first, in full disclosure, I have to let everybody know what my disqualifications are. So
we'll go for it.
Yeah. I had a 2.2 grade point average in high school, which is totally abysmal. My last job was as a gas pump jockey at a gas station. I had an honorable discharge from the U.S. Army, but that's very deceiving because I was likely responsible for extending the Cold War for at least 2 years because my term of service handing out toilet paper was so unremarkable. People often thank me for my service when they find out I'm a veteran, and I say, don't thank me. You didn't see it, and if you saw it, you probably wouldn't be grateful. And then this tops it off, and I managed to get a life sentence without really committing a crime, and that's not easy to do. You got to be a real idiot to do that.
That's not an easy task.
We're going to take a break here, and we'll be back in just a few. Please stay tuned. Hi, this is Anarchist prisoner Sean Swain again, and we're just coming back from break. I was in the middle of explaining why I'm totally unqualified to give you advice and why you should never listen to me. Let's see, I left off with, I got a life sentence without really committing a crime, which isn't easy to do.
Not an easy task.
No. Yeah, it takes work.
Or sometimes
and I have an Associate of Arts. Well, I mean, you can kind of fall into it.
Right.
But still, you shouldn't take advice from somebody who does that. And I have an Associate of Arts in the Social Sciences. And that's the biggest disqualifier that I think I have. because with an Associate of Arts in the social sciences, you can go into any diner in America with $1 and get a cup of coffee. That's what it qualifies you for. And I'm an anarchist, in case my mention of being an anarchist didn't already register.
So for the people that don't know what an anarchist is, why don't you let them know what an anarchist is? Some people might not know.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people use it in a lot of different ways, so I can only speak for myself, not all anarchists everywhere. Being an anarchist means that I believe in freedom. I think that freedom is the best condition we can exist in, and I believe that when we are free, when we're completely free from compulsion and from imposed restrictions, that we're our best selves and we can live our best lives. But for me, that doesn't just mean ridding our world of bosses and dictators, although it does mean that. It means also being able to liberate ourselves from the unseen forces that make us unfree. And that's how that's why I developed this anarchology. One thing that does qualify me, though, is that I know a few things about trauma. In 2012, I was subjected to torture. The FBI developed a domestic torture program and outsourced it to state agencies like the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. So I was selected ideologically on the basis of being an anarchist, and I was subjected to a year of torture just for having political ideas more thoughtful than the FBI's. I wrote a book called Opposing Torture. I have to plug that. I wrote a book called Opposing Torture that's now available at lbcbooks.com or wherever good books are stolen.
And you'll be able to find the link in the comments section.
Oh, wow, there it is, by the magic of the interweb.
In the comment section or the description box, it'll be one of those.
Okay, awesome. And so now I have over 4,000 pages of FBI files, and I'm in a terror database without so much as ever being accused of giving someone a paper cut. If you want to get my FBI file, by the way, it would cost $40 and it would come on 3 discs, which is roughly the same as the Sex Pistols box set. And if you have a choice between my FBI file or the Sex Pistols, I would suggest that you can't go wrong with the Sex Pistols.
For sure. That's a fact.
And so, yeah, that's me. We should also put in, we should have Elo, right?
Yes, he should be coming on, but he might not be here yet, Elo. But he might not, I don't know. He might be able to call in. We'll see.
Okay. So in the meantime, should we maybe start talking about the idea that I have for anarchology and where we're going with this thing?
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to start.
Okay. So I think like you, I went into the social sciences with the intentions of helping people, of learning things that will help other people lead better lives.
Right.
Which I think most people in the social sciences do.
Absolutely.
But I've come to see the social sciences differently, not as something that empowers people to live happy lives, but as possibly a powerful and potentially dangerous control structure. We don't typically question the role of psychiatry or psychology. We think of mental health professionals as doctors. They are to the mind what medical doctors are to the body. And they treat patients and they heal patients and they put our interests first. But that's a lot to unpack. First,
right.
Because I think this idea of treating the mind, right? in medical sciences, you can treat a broken arm because you can see it. You can look at an X-ray, right? But how do you treat a broken mind?
Right. That's what I always have said. It's so different because, like you said, you can't go take an x-ray. You can't, I mean, they have brain scans and they have, things like with the chemicals and different things like that. So there are things that they have been able to capture, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still
Yeah, and
not
then
as
again, though,
effective and impactful, to people as if they were to see it on, an x-ray or something like that.
yeah, but even then, when you're dealing with the brain scans, you're dealing with biology.
Right.
These are things that you can see, and
Right.
that's kind of, people think that that's a large percentage of what happens in the social sciences, when really it's a very, very small. The whole chemical thing with the brain is really a small chunk of it, and mostly it deals with a mind rather than a brain, and a mind is a different thing. You can draw a circle on your desk, for instance, and you can put a brain in there and you can see it, right?
Right.
But you can't draw a circle on the desk and put a mind in there.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
No,
Exactly.
so so in that respect, when we're dealing with social sciences, I'm reminded of when I was a Cub Scout and we'd go out camping. At night we'd go snipe hunting. Have you ever heard about this?
Mm-mm. Fill me
Snipe
in.
hunting. Yeah. Okay, so in scouting, you go out snipe hunting, and snipes are supposed to be these elusive creatures that hide in the treetops at night. And so you run around with flashlights and paper bags trying to catch these snipes.
What do they look
Right?
like? What are they, an animal?
Well, no, it's a non-existent thing. It's something that a scoutmaster makes up.
Oh,
So
okay,
you
okay.
go running around. So you go running around snipe hunting in the woods with flashlights and paper bags, running into trees, and everybody's like, "Oh, there's one, and it's just
Right.
shadows." You're just chasing shadows around. Nobody's ever seen a snipe, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
in that respect, when we're dealing with the mind in the social sciences, we're kind of dealing with, excuse me, we're kind of dealing with something that is like professional snipe hunters in a sense, right? Because nobody's ever seen a mind. So what we have are psychologists and psychologists running around with paper bags and flashlights out in the woods, searching for the mind. And they diagnose diseases, right? These professional snipe hunters. And again, this isn't like medical doctors who see viruses and bacteria with microscopes,
Right.
who look at x-rays and see broken bones. It's not like that. The mental diseases come out of a book, as you know, called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM. The Shrink Bible. Do you have a copy of that, by the way?
I do.
By any chance?
I do.
Yep. See? Interesting reading, isn't it?
It is. I have a hard copy and the digital copy.
Wow. Okay. Do you have highlighting in your hard copy?
I do.
Okay. There we go. Yep. See. So tell me if I'm wrong, but all of this is very subjective.
It is. I mean,
Yes.
I always thought that it was, but I mean, because you think everything is just a theory, it's just someone's theory, and we all can have different theories of how something is or why something is, and you just kind of, and that's why I always feel like it's so difficult because, they, as a clinician or someone that's a clinician, they're able to, they do assessments. And so you meet someone and you do an assessment and you meet with them kind of maybe on a weekly basis for maybe 30 minutes. And even though, okay, that's good, that's great, and you never can get, the only real way that you can figure out and know what is actually going on with someone is through honestly observing them in their natural like environment on a regular basis over a long period of time so that you can get a full understanding of their patterns, get a full understanding of how they're interacting with their environment, all of those kind of things, because you do an assessment that gives you a good idea, and then you meet with them on a regular basis that helps to give an even better idea. You meet with family members and kind of do like your whole background thing that gives a good idea. But you're never going to be able to have a full good grasp until you're able to witness someone on a daily basis in their natural environment.
And then what you're really doing, and this is something even apart from the mental health kind of paradigm, is that you're essentially getting a grasp of the person's suffering, of the trauma they've experienced, of how they respond to it, and all of that, which really isn't a scientific approach. It's really just an empathy thing, right?
Right. I mean,
yeah.
I think that it could be. Yeah. It's not really scientific. That is more of
because when you're dealing with diagnoses, right? Getting back to the DSM, when you're dealing with diagnoses, what you're dealing with is essentially diseases that aren't viruses or bacteria. They're simply things that psychologists and psychologists have termed. For instance, Karen has decided it's time for us to take another break, and so hope you stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Hi, and we're back from the break. I am more caffeinated than I was before, and
if that's
where we
even
left
possible.
Off. Well, I'm in the spirit world now. I'm seeing things other people don't see. Yeah, and that's why I'm talking fast. I hope everybody can keep up. Wear a seatbelt. What I wanted to get into was a couple of diagnoses that are in the DSM. Just to kind of provide some context for what I mean here. First is homosexuality. Homosexuality was listed as a mental disease until 1973 in the DSM. Then, in 1973, homosexuality was removed, right? Now, I don't know, but I can't think of anything analogous in the medical sciences where there was something that was a disease that stopped being a disease, right?
Right. Let's see.
So,
is there anything?
Like smallpox. I don't know. I can't think of anything.
It was still a disease. It just minimized then, how many people got it. But it's still, if you get it now, it's still a disease. But
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah. So for me, I have a hard time understanding how something can be a science when it treats a disease on one day, and then the following day they concede that the disease is not a disease. And now I would even go so far as to say the social sciences accept that homosexuality, being gay, has never really been a disease, right? So in that respect, I think this calls into question the system by which the social sciences work. Another one is something called oppositional defiant disorder. That's one that if you have your DSM.
And I looked up the diseases. I didn't find that there's ever been a disease that is no longer found to be a disease.
Right. So I bring all that up in order to say that I question whether or not the social sciences are really engaging in a science. Because if they're really engaging in a science, then a disease is a disease. It isn't a disease and then not a disease.
Well,
that's just a little weird.
I don't but they don't call them diseases, they call them disorders or
Right.
illnesses.
Yeah.
So,
right. But those are, but, in all fairness, a disorder is a disease. It's a mental disease. It's an illness. So even if it's a disorder, it's still the idea that that you are disordered if you're experiencing this, right? So what I would suggest is this, that the social sciences, to a large part, are not necessarily there anymore, anyway, for helping us live happy, joyful lives and deal with our problems. But the social sciences, instead, really serve the larger social order. So here's what I mean. If you run around naked in a parking lot, a cop or a judge will call you a criminal, right? Because running around naked is illegal. If you run around naked in a synagogue, the rabbi is going to call you a sinner because you broke laws of God.
right.
If you run around naked in a cathedral, a priest will call you a cab because you're not a 10-year-old boy. But then he's going to call you a sinner. and
So this
and
is just a side note. I looked up the differences between disease and disorder because I knew there was some sort of differences, and that's why disease I think refers to medical, and then disorder refers to mental. And so it says disease
okay,
is a particular distinctive process in the body with a specific cause and characteristic symptoms. And then disorders are irregularity, disturbances, like you said, of interruption of normal functions. And then it also has
right.
syndrome as a number of symptoms occurring together and characterizing a specific disease.
Okay, gotcha. So, yeah. And still, what we have, though, are diagnoses, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, oppositional defiance disorder. I like this.
Right.
So, this is out of the DSM-3, and I understand it hasn't changed since then. But you can
Yeah, I
tell
have
me
it
with
pulled
your
up if
current
you,
DSM.
yeah, I have it pulled up if you want to know what it currently says.
Yeah. So this is what I have. Tell me if
Okay.
this is right. A pattern of negativistic, hostile, and defiant behavior lasting at least 6 months.
Let me see. So yeah.
And
Yep.
it has 8 symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to suffer at least 4 of these for 6 months in order to get this diagnosis.
Right.
And I'm going to go through what these say here. That you often actively defy or refuse to comply with requests from authority figures or with rules. Right. So you don't do what people who are above you tell you to do. You often argue with authority figures. So that means you're smarter than your boss. And so if you do any of these, check the box because that goes toward your diagnosis, right?
Right. Right.
You often argue with authority figures. Often loses temper. I don't know necessarily what often means, but if you're mad a lot, which means you're surrounded by assholes who make you mad, check the box because you have a disorder. Often touchy or easily annoyed. Often angry and resentful. So with those two, I think every teenager in the world checks both of those boxes. Often deliberately annoys others. Often blames others for his or her mistakes or misbehavior. That's every kid I've ever met. And spitefulness or vindictiveness at least twice within the past 6 months. So what we're describing here is being a teenager. And so,
right.
And so what a normal teenager is adds up to oppositional defiance disorder. So essentially, being normal is being abnormal.
And you also have to think, when who's taking, who's doing the evaluation, because it's also something that
Right.
can change from the perspective of, clinician to clinician, as, they're gathering all of their information from like the background information, talking to the person, doing like all of these different things. But it still can go from, it could change. It could vary from clinician
Yeah.
to clinician.
It's all very subjective. But even assuming that the person who's doing the diagnosis has the best of intentions, there are a number of built-in assumptions, even in this oppositional defiance disorder, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it
So,
says lasting at least 6 months, as evidenced by at least 4 of these symptoms. So, it lasting 6 months, does that mean, you have you lose your temper for 3 times a week for 6 months? Would that be considered, or would someone say 1 time a week you're losing your temper, but it lasts for 6 months?
yeah,
So once a week for 6 months you're losing your temper. Is that a lot, or is that
yeah,
not a lot? You know what I mean? Or if is that a lot compared to a
yeah.
kid that's losing their temper every day of the week?
hmm And I would suggest that context matters here, because what this is assuming is that you shouldn't be getting mad very often. Well, whoever wrote the book doesn't know what your situation is. Maybe
Hmm.
you should be mad,
Well,
right?
yeah, and I think that
If
that's also why all of the other factors are taken into consideration, though, too, such as environment and family relationships or family conflict, that, kids, if they're at school, since this is, for kids, if they're having problems at school, if they're being bullied at school, all of those kind of play a factor in, situational aspects of it,
Mhm,
because is it that you have all of these things because of the situation that you're in? Because if it's because of the situation that you're in, then you don't likely have ODD. It's a situational thing. You take them out of that situation and out of that environment, then all of those
well, you
symptoms
hope.
go away. Right. But if they
Yeah,
don't
at
go
least you
away,
hope
then
so.
it's more likely that that is what is going on with them.
Yeah, yeah, but you hope that's the case anyway. You
Right.
know, um, but I can tell you that I'm probably I probably qualify for at least 6 out of the 8. You know,
Yeah, my son is
uh,
13, and I mean, he acts like that, like I said, every day. But
mhm,
I think it's all of the other aspects about what's going on in your life too that play a part, which is why, they do get all of the background information, but at the same time, you're never going to really, like they always say, you never really know somebody. People have been living
mhm,
with husbands and wives and, don't know them, and find out they're,
yeah,
serial killers the next day and you had no idea. So it's like,
yes,
if they're
and you're
able,
also only dealing. Mhm.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and you're also only dealing with behavior. You
Right.
know, the fact of the matter is we don't know why the person. You can look at somebody's behavior and you can assume that you know the motives that they have behind what they're doing, but you don't necessarily know.
Right.
You know, you're
Hmm.
you're dealing with behavior
And
and
there's
what you're
nothing to really
interpreting from the
pinpoint
person's
it out.
behavior.
Right, and there's nothing to pinpoint
Right.
it like an X-ray, like we said, at the beginning of the show. There's nothing, you can't be like, they're acting this way. Can we take an X-ray and see what's going on? It's
hmm
they're acting this way, and you have to, I mean, I think that it comes down to you just really have to be, learn how to rather, you know, learn the technique of communication and reading in between the lines and being observant and attentive.
So we'll take a break here, and we'll come back to that. And we're back from a break, and I'm even more caffeinated than I was before, if that's possible.
If that's possible.
So we were talking about the institution of psychology and psychiatry and the social sciences, and my general thrust is that we're dealing with institutions. We're dealing with an institution, and it serves more so, I would suggest, the social order than it serves an individual. That the diagnoses of mental illness, there's a psychiatrist named Thomas Szaj, Szazz. I think that's Hungarian. I don't know how to pronounce that. I think it's Szaj. He spoke about mental illness and our current concept of mental health, and he referred to it as a socially useful fiction. The idea that we create this framework in the hopes, of course, that this is going to assist us socially in some way. When we're dealing with people who are suffering or sad, or people who are annoying other people. But the end result is that we have, in a 20-year period between 1998 and 2018, we have increased the prescriptions for antidepressants by 400%. And in that time, suicide rates have gone up 35%. So we have more shrinks than ever, and we have more access to so-called mental health than ever before. And the end result is the number of suicides and disabilities have gone up. All indicators of mental and emotional suffering are increasing. We're seeing more and more seriously disturbed people acting out in far more serious ways, mass shootings and road rage and so on. There is a guy named Thomas Insel. He was the chief of the National Institutes of Mental Health. And he said, this is a quote from him. He said, all of the ways in which we've approached these illnesses, and with a lot of people working very hard, the outcomes we've got to point to are pretty bleak. And he said, whatever it is we've been doing for 5 decades, it ain't working. which is pretty blunt.
That is because I think that's very much because we're just trying to focus on, and not even focusing on as much as we should, the mental health and behavioral health aspects of everything, but not focusing on how our society causes those things, how our society kind of is a direct, like that's what needs to be fixed, is these different things in the society, which I think that everyone's very much aware of that. And I think that, the powers that be in the world are very much aware of that too. It's money. It costs too much. And so, yeah, all of these things are going up, but that's because our society is going down, basically. Our society,
exactly.
Our morals, values, all of the things in our society that, promote good mental health is unimportant in our society. And so with that, all of those things are happening, but there's less people that are, even though there's more, psychologists, psychiatrists, all of those things, it's still not enough for the amount of people that the society and our environment is impacting. Because it's impacting so many people, and we're getting a lot of people that are becoming like mental health and social service, professionals, but it's still not enough to keep up with how much the society is damaging, people.
And so, that's exactly it. You've hit the nail on the head.
We're focused on the wrong things.
and with the social sciences as they exist today, and this is my primary criticism, is that what the social sciences attempt to do is reconcile the individual back to society. The idea is to get the individual to adjust in order to reintegrate into the social order.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if your social order is toxic,
mm-hmm.
then you're not doing the individual any favors.
Exactly.
You're not looking at all of the root causes
mm-hmm.
that are causing an individual to be the way the individual is.
And
you're pointing at the individual and calling the individual maladjusted or, disordered.
Right.
Well, perhaps it's the social order. Perhaps
right.
it's the social order that's disordered.
It's
and
kind
if
of
that's
like
the case,
an abusive relationship. And it's
mm-hmm.
like as if
Yes.
you were calling the abuser, like just ignoring everything that the abuser's doing and be like bringing the victim out and saying, they're the ones that are in the wrong or they need to fix whatever they have going on without thinking about, the abuser, because that's basically exactly what
mm-hmm.
it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you should be ashamed because you're not making your marriage work with somebody who's a sociopath.
You should be ashamed that you're not making enough. Right. You should be ashamed that you're not making enough money to have a house. You should be ashamed that you don't have enough money to buy a car. You
mm-hmm.
should
Mm-hmm.
like it's all of but then all of those things are what then starts making people anxious, depressed, angry, hopeless, all of those kind of feelings.
Mm-hmm. And so that's why I've come up with this whole idea that's either madness or brilliance, anarchology, because it's the study of freedom, right? And the
mm-hmm.
forces that oppose it and how to get to free. And that even includes, essentially, all of the things that I feel like the social sciences have overlooked, which is how we can have an accurate view of the social order itself and all of the things that are happening there, and come to understand the trauma that we've experienced, including the trauma that we've been taught not to see as trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then having reconciled ourselves with that, having navigated that, we can come to a place where we can either choose to integrate into the social order, or we can confront it. But either way, we can make a free will choice based upon what it is that
right.
that we So that's freedom. And so that's the anarchological approach, I think, is to look at these larger systems and to empower ourselves, to take the power to ourselves to deal with our own trauma and anxiety in a healthy way so that we can become our best selves. Something I think that the social sciences have been failing to help us do. And so, what do you think?
I agree. I mean, I think that, like I said, I think that the social sciences have done the best that they can, but you can only do so much when also you need the sociologists, the people that study the society, because they go together, and those two have to be able to work together, research together, learn together, because they both interact with each other so much. Because like we said, you think about the brain and how all of the things interact with each other, but we don't really take into consideration, we like to ignore that it's a lot of situational and environmental stuff, and it has to do with the society, but it goes back to the powers that be and money and greed. Because we could, I feel like, do all of the right things And there has been so much research done on how to do things, the right way to do things, books upon books and research upon research of all the different ways to do things, all the different theories of ways that you can do things. And the only reason
and
that
change
it's
the
not
structures
being
in the social
used,
order.
right. And the only
Yeah,
reason that it's not being used is because of money, because it
yeah.
will cost too
Well,
much
yeah.
to
Mhm.
do all of the right things.
Yeah. The few who benefit from the world the way it is keep it the way it is, rather
Exactly.
than changing the world to what it needs to be for all of us to experience the same happiness that they have. They monopolize
Exactly.
happiness by cutting us out of it. Yeah.
And so then you just
So,
have the social service worker professionals and mental health workers that are completely overwhelmed. I think is a lot of what
yeah,
it comes down to too, is that they're just overwhelmed.
yeah. And in the end result, the final analysis, you're going to see a shrink and you're living in crazy town. That's
Exactly.
not really going to help you much.
Exactly. Exactly.
so, so yeah. So what I have planned, if you're down with this, is in the next episode. The next episode will deal with the question of, do you know who you are? And the reason that's important is, by my thinking, you can't liberate yourself if you don't know who you are, right? You have to locate the person you want to liberate. And
Right.
so we'll go into that question there. And then we'll spend a few episodes kind of deconstructing the social order that we live in so that we can understand the sources of our trauma
Right.
and the sources of our pain and suffering and how these institutions are really operating to our detriment, right? And this is how we have ended up the way that we are. And only then, my hope is that if we do a decent job deconstructing those things, we get a good sense of why it is that we're suffering, and then we can do something about it. So
Right.
that's the anarchological approach.
I like it.
Mhm.
I like it. I like it. Because, like
So
I said, I think people are just overwhelmed, burnt out, and definitely mental health social service worker professionals are definitely at this point in time overwhelmed and burnt out, because it's very much like, okay, I can do mental health stuff, behavioral, like I can do all of the tools, skills, and everything like that, but if they then have to go back out on the streets because they're homeless, then that just like
yeah,
vetoes out everything that I just sat doing all this time.
yeah, yeah. We
So,
have to change the circumstances. We can't
right,
always change just ourselves in order to accommodate the circumstances.
right,
Sometimes we have to change the circumstances. We have to change the situation. We have to make the situation accommodate us,
right.
and that's a healthy approach, also,
Yeah,
I think.
I think
And
so
so that's what anarchology is all about.
too. Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So I hope people tune in for the next episode when our topic will be, do you know who you are? I'm Sean Swain,
And I'm Bumblebee.
and yeah, we hope you tune in for the next episode. If you're listening, you are the resistance.